Spokane City Council is getting ready to unveil its homelessness policy overhaul. Here with more on this is the Center Square's Washington reporter Tim Clouser. Tim, this overhaul has been in the works for a while. What is the background?
Yeah, so a little over 6 months ago, the city council announced a series of community roundtable discussions that they were going to take feedback from to guide their policy decisions in this homelessness overhaul. Now, over the summer and last spring, there was a lot of conversations from both sides of the aisle in Spokane about how the city should change its laws regarding homelessness to better protect public safety, but also the vulnerable population itself. Now, the council's conservative minority tried to push several measures over a few months related to the crisis, and almost all were deferred or referred back to committee, essentially making them dead until it had support from that progressive majority. Now, they kept putting off these ordinances until the end of the series of roundtables, which ended back in December. So now they've just kind of been at a standstill. People have been wondering when these amendments or new laws are going to be introduced to the public. So last week I was talking to the council office and heard rumors that, these amendments might reach committee over the next few days. Now, that didn't happen, but I was able to get a copy of all of those, and they did include a wealth of changes, both ones that might catch some people off guards and others that were widely favored by both sides during the series of roundtables.
So let's get into that. What proposed changes will the City Council be considering?
Yeah, they're considering amendments to various sections of laws to do with homelessness in the city. I have, I think, 5 or 6 documents alone, so I'm going to run through a little bit of those. The first major change would be to the city's homelessness response policy. Now, the current policy says that anytime the city opens a facility that it owns, or funds, that it needs to be low or no barrier. This means that it pretty much removes all obstacles for individuals wanting to get in to get treatment or housing options. But it also prohibits the city from doing things like sobriety checks or mandating that these people go into treatment. So there's a little bit of give and take. Now, the amendments to this policy would remove that low to no barrier language. So the city wouldn't be held to that mandate. That means that they can fund and open these facilities that hold people to a higher standard, which hopefully will increase the quality of life for those around it. Now, it also changes language such as shall continuously provide shelter to should, but otherwise subject to funding. Now, this follows a major budget deficit that the council and the administration was able to alleviate over the last few months. But it shifts the mandate for the city from they have to always provide the shelter to, look, you can provide the shelter if you have the funding, but legally you're not bound to it. Now, some other major changes include amendments to the laws regarding unlawful camping in the city. Now, this follows the U.S. Supreme Court overturning the Ninth Circuit's Martin v. Boise ruling last June. Now, that lower court ruling previously prohibited cities from enforcing camping bans without having enough shelter beds. Now, this language change allows the city to issue citations to people whether or not they have any beds available. Now, that's in line with the SCOTUS overturning Martin v. Boise. Some others include the city's sit and lie law, which prohibits loitering essentially within downtown from 6 a.m. to midnight. Now, there's 2 versions that they gave me. One would expand the ordinance so it applies 24/7 instead of just that time frame that I mentioned before. It also has the same change that's in line with SCOTUS overturning Martin v. Boise. Now, the other option would repeal it altogether. It includes a line that says the existing ordinance offers no practical benefit to efforts to regulate the unlawful or unsafe use of public safety or public spaces, and unfairly stigmatizes the homeless. Now, while this document could potentially repeal the sit and lie law. It doesn't repeal another law called pedestrian interference, which the Spokane Police Department often uses in place of sit and lie currently because of its limitations due to shelter availability. Now, others include good neighbor agreements. The city currently requires these agreements between providers for city-owned facilities and the neighborhoods around them. Now, this would expand that to be city-funded facilities as well. A lot of the model that the city is moving into, instead of it entering these contracts itself, it hires an operator that enters these contracts with smaller providers to subvert that fiscal requirement. So this essentially requires the city to be a partner in those agreements, whether they own or fund the facility if it's receiving more than $50,000. That one was also highly favored by the series of roundtables. Now, the last main one is shelter activation criteria. Now, during extreme heat and cold events, the city provides surge shelters, essentially just extra beds. Currently, that's when temperatures dip below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 95 degrees Fahrenheit, above 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So this change will go from will be activated under those temperatures to should be activated. So it removes the obligation, but it also has another language change, taking it from temperatures to indices. So instead of it having to be 32 degrees or less or 95 degrees and above, it would be what it might feel like outside. Because a lot of times we look at the weather and it'll say, look, it's 32 degrees outside, but with the wind and everything else, it feels like 25. So this amendment would rely on that. Now, I know there's a lot that I just threw at you, but those are some of the biggest ones that are on the table, along with a lot of other smaller language changes throughout those documents.
And how could state law play into this conversation?
Yeah, so the legislature in Olympia is considering several measures right now that could impact not only Spokane, but cities across the state as they sort of shift their approach to homelessness. Now, one notable one is House Bill 1380, which is making its way through the legislature. And that would allow homeless individuals to sue municipalities over the objective reasonableness of their laws regulating homelessness. Now, some people argue that it's not going to result in an increase in lawsuits against cities. But others argue that, look, cities won't even regulate homelessness anymore because they're afraid of these lawsuits altogether. So Councilmember Paul Dillon, who is a part of the Spokane City Council's progressive majority, told me that, look, some of these amendments that we're considering could be impacted by 1380 and others to do with citing facilities. So right now, Mayor Brown and her administration told me, look, we don't think right now is the time to be making changes. We really wish the council would just sit back and wait to see what the state does until it makes any big decision.
Well, Tim, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.